friends, I'm Sharon Shen. I want to welcome you to my small studio here in my home. And today I'm going to run a video to teach you how to paint some pen and ink flowers in acrylics, the project we're going to be doing. And I've been taking some classes the past year from various artists, and the latest one I took was one from Tracy Weinzapfel, and she teaches like journaling with a lot of different techniques. And the class I took from her recently was on pen and ink and watercolors. So it was really a fun class, and I thought after taking it, I'd try to adapt it to acrylic since I'm mostly an acrylic artist. So I painted the design on just multimedia paper just to play with it and see how it went. And you can do that if you want to save space. I usually use like a multimedia journal. Here it's a wire-bound one that makes it easy to flip pages and just practice designs. Or if you wanted to paint it on like a cradled art panel would be a nice surface for it, or even a stretched canvas. So this is painted with just 4 colors of Deco Art Americana acrylics, and the video is about an hour, so it works up pretty quickly. So I hope you'll come along and paint with me today. Here's a list of the supplies I used for this project. I'll have it available as a PDF download for you, along with 3 sizes of the traceable line drawing that you can use. I used a Canson mixed media pad that's 9 by 12. It's spiral bound, and I use it to do a lot of my sample artwork that I don't want to actually paint on a finished surface. I use a 12-inch square to mark off whatever size I want on the paper. This is 9 by 12 paper, so I'm marking an 8-inch square. So if I kind of line the square up evenly at the edge, I can do the first 8-inch side, draw it in with a pencil, and then I come around the corner and come partway down the right angle to get started. Then I just rotate the square and line it up evenly with the first line I did. To stick my head in here so I can actually see where that line is. I draw the next 8-inch side, and again rotate the I keep wanting to call it a T-square, but it's just a square. And just carefully line it up and pencil my third side at 8 inches. And then I can turn it again and finish up that partial fourth side that I did in the first corner. It gives me nice right angles. So now what I will do is tape it off. I use a blue painter's tape. This is just some that I bought off Amazon, but you can get it at any hardware store. Scotch brand, or you can buy the generic one. I find the Scotch brand works pretty good on the small dim media paper. It peels off fairly easily without tearing my paper. I've tried some artist tapes that actually didn't work at all. They tore my paper when I peeled them off. But this one is working well. So you just want to kind of line it up with that pencil line so it's evenly spaced, and then just work your way around all the sides. When you tape off your border like this, it you don't have to worry about painting within the penciled lines. It just keeps a nice even edge. And it's just so amazing when you peel that tape off after you've painted your project, how pretty it looks with that white clean border around the edge. So finish up this last side, and you want to make sure those inner edges of the tape are pressed down. I like to gesso my multimedia paper just to add an additional sealer over it, and it gives it a little more tack. I'm using Nova Color gesso, but you can also get something at like Hobby Lobby or Michael's. This is Artist Loft in a jar. Nova's mail order out of Los Angeles, but they've got nice paints and mediums, and they are really inexpensive. I bought this condiment bottle at the Dollar Tree, and I poured my gesso in it, so it makes it nice. I can just put out a little bit at a time. It makes it easier to not overdo it when you're putting it on your surface. Except right there when I had a little glob of dry gesso in the spout, it kind of squirted out on the side. So just use a large brush. I'm using like a 3/4 inch or 1 inch synthetic brush, and I'm just going to give this a nice even coat. You don't want any ridges in the gesso. You want to smooth it out. Um, I don't like a lot of texture. I've done it a couple times where I have put texture into it, and then I'm always sorry about that after I finish up. You might have to tip the page a little bit to see where it's glossy, so you can see where the wet gesso is and what you've missed. But just give this a nice even coat, and you're going to let it dry, that coat dry, and then apply a second coat. If you don't have any gesso on pan, you can just use white acrylic paint. Your paper will ripple a little bit while it's wet, but that usually will flatten out mostly as the gesso dries. You can use a hair dryer or a heat gun to dry it. If you're like me, you don't want to wait around for things to dry. I'm always in too much of a hurry. So we finished our second coat and we're drying it, and we'll get ready now to work on the background. We're going to work on the background, and we're going to use Bahama Blue, which is a light aqua, and a 3/4 inch flat synthetic brush. Put a daub of the paint out on your palette. I'm using a gray wax palette. Dip your brush in some water because we want this paint to be thinner and easier to glide on the background. We don't want a heavy solid color. We want it to vary in how thick it is. I mean, you want some of that white to kind of bleed through, and you want to see your brush strokes. So just keep adding water as you need it so that it makes the paint move. And we're going to paint over this entire background over the white. A little bit of white shows through here and there. It's not a big deal. We just want this to kind of have some variation and value and give some interest to the background. Blue's going to also, this blue-green color is going to also add a nice pop of contrasting color to our pink daisies. You're going to let this dry or dry it with a hair dryer. And the paint should dry pretty quickly. And next we're going to use our traceable pattern to add some reference points on this background. I'm not going to transfer all these flower petals. We're just going to do the centers of the daisies. So I cut my traceable down to the 8-inch square size and positioned it on my paper so I can see the little border around the edge is even. And use a little bit of your painter's tape to hold it in place. And we're going to put a piece of graphite paper between the traceable and your surface. You want to put the shiny side normally goes down. You want to make sure that the side that has the graphite on it is going to transfer to your paper, not to the back of your tracing. So slide that in between the two, and then you can use a stylus or a pen or pencil, and we're just going to do a little circle where each of these daisy centers are. This will keep us on track. You can lift the paper and just check and make sure you can see your centers before you pull the tape off. But now you can just set these aside. The next color we're going to use is titanium white. This is going to be actually the color of our background. We're going to do something similar that we did with the blue, but we're going to let more of the blue background show through than we did of the white gesso. I'm using a little smaller brush, so this is maybe a 1/2 inch flat. And we're just going to add white strokes in different directions. And pay attention to where your daisy centers are because we don't want to cover them up. And we want to leave a little space around them. You want the blue background to show through because they can help add some shading to our pink daisy petals. So just keep stroking around and leave those daisy centers visible. You're not going to put any white paint over them. If you want to, you can, vary the color a little bit. I've tried here to see if I wanted to add a lighter blue color, but I think there's not enough contrast unless you get it a really light blue that I think the blue, just the white over the blue works better because you can still see the blue through it and gives you a tint anyway without actually mixing the color. So you're just going to stroke around over your whole background except for the areas around each of the daisy centers. Leave some of the blue visible on the edges of your canvas, or I say canvas, but this is the edges of your paper if you're painting on the taped paper. Adding these colorful backgrounds in behind your painting just add a lot of sparkle to your finished design. If you need more white paint, just put some more out. I picked up the wrong color of white there. I had a bottle of warm white sitting on my table, and you can see it's a lot creamier if you look at the two together. I'm using the Snow White or Titanium White, which is a much whiter, cooler white. If you're not paying attention, it's easy to pick up the wrong bottle. I'm going back over some of the dried paint because you'll find that acrylics dry a shade or two darker than they are when they are wet. So the white might look very high contrast. When you first put it on, it looks really, really white. But once it dries and settles into that blue background paint, it looks more transparent. So I'm just going back and adding in some second strokes of white to just pop some of that white out a little bit more. But you can see our daisy centers are still visible and they give you that heart shape that we're going for. Okay, I think that's enough of the white background. You can always add more in later if you want to. Once again, we're going to dry this layer just to speed up our project time. I'll fast forward through here. Once the painting was dry, I decided I wanted some stronger pops of white. So, like I said, sometimes after the paint's dry, they're not quite as bright and as much of a highlight as they were when they were wet. So I'm just going back in and popping in some strokes of another layer of white to make them stronger. This is sort of optional. It just depends on how your painting looks and what color you like your background to be. I just wanted a little bit more sparkle. So add what white you want, and again, we'll let it dry before we go on to the next step. We're going to paint the daisy centers now, and we're going to use, I think Yellow Light is the name of the paint. It's just a bright lemon yellow. And I'm using a round brush. I think it's maybe a 8 or 10 round. I'll put the actual size I used in the supply list. And I'm just going to quickly paint in these little centers. They don't have to be perfect circles, just get a layer of yellow over top of your centers. That yellow just looks so cheerful against that aqua and white. Looks very springy. I think the rest of this painting I do with just this round brush. So we're only using, I think this is the third brush we've used. We've used 2 flats and now a round. Next, we're going to paint the flower petals. I'm using a color called Strawberry. It's just a bright medium pink. With all these colors, if you don't have these exact colors, just pick something similar. It's not really going to make a difference in your overall painting. So I'm putting out some white because we're going to mix this together just to give us some variations in pink color. So I'm just pick up a little pink on the brush, then add a little white to it, and then just work back and forth between the colors. And we're going to pull petals on around each of these centers. It's just a kind of a little straight stroke. Start out the outer petal and pull back towards the center. And you're going to work around that center, always pulling towards the middle. You can vary the length of your petals so they're not so even. Make some of them a little fatter, some of them a little skinnier, some of them a little darker pink, and some a little lighter pink. Now I'm working here trying to stay in one spot, but it's easier if you turn your board so that you can pull back towards yourself. Or at least for me, that's how it works. So don't try to work only in one direction and bend your hand to fit all these petals around the center. Work in a way that's comfortable to you. So we're just going to continue doing the same thing around all these flower centers. You want them to kind of butt up against the flower next to it, so we have like a fairly solid little wreath of flowers here. And I'm going to finish this one, then I'm going to speed up the video so that you don't have to watch me paint each of these in actual time. But you get the gist of what I'm doing. You'll notice as we're going through these flowers, that center where we left some of the background showing through the Bahama blue background. As you're finishing more of these daisies, you can see where that almost gives like a shaded center to the petals. That the pink, because it's a little transparent, being painted over that Bahama blue, gives the effect of sort of like a purple color. Your eye just kind of blends those two together. Now we're going to finish up this last daisy. And if it takes you longer, that's fine. You can just pause the video and get caught up. We're going to add a little more dimension to the centers by putting some of the yellow back onto them. And then while it's wet, we're going to mix in a little bit of the strawberry color. And this creates an orange since you're mixing yellow and a red. Dab that orange to the bottom and left of your centers. That'll give a little shaded area. So you can pick up some just plain yellow and put it to the top and right, and then that'll create more of the highlight and some of the orange at the bottom left to create your shadow. I find it helps to add some of the yellow first. You don't want it to dry, but let it set up a little bit. And then you can dab your orange into it. These centers are fairly small, so it's easy to cover too much area. So while it's still wet, I'm going back and dabbing in some of that orange. And you can vary your orange by adding a little more red, it'll be a little darker. And if you add a little more yellow, it's a warmer, more yellow orange. You can add a little more highlight by mixing a lighter yellow with the white and yellow and adding a stronger highlight to the top right of your centers. I'm just tapping this color in, just little dabs. When you change your values, some things are darker and some things are lighter. That's what gives more dimension to your painting. So you can see these centers are starting to look almost dimensional. with just this little bit of shadow and highlight. Now we're going to strengthen the shading on the flower petals. We're going to create a purple by mixing the red, which is our strawberry, and the Bahama blue, since a red and a blue color will make a violet. More red and it'll be a kind of a red violet, more blue, it'll be a blue violet. So I'm just going to stroke over the center of these petals, pulling out from the center and just out maybe a quarter to half of the way on each of the petals. You just want to darken that center where they tuck in under the flower center. Again, we're adding form to the flower petals by adding some variation in the value. And you're just going to work around each of your flower centers and darken those petals. Just kind of a light, sketchy stroke. So basically, this design uses, three colors on the color wheel: yellow, um, I guess magenta, and cyan. The Bahama blue would be kind of your cyan color, and the strawberries a magenta, and then you've got your yellow. And when you mix two primary colors, you get your secondary colors. So we're mixing the orange and a purple, and in the next step, we'll be mixing a green for the leaves. But look here, as you look around this little flower wreath and you see these dark purple added to the centers, again, it gives them a lot of dimension and makes them more interesting. Okay, as I said, we're going to mix our next secondary color on the color wheel, which is yellow and blue, to make a green. And you can see the cyan and yellow make a really pretty bright lime green. And we're going to make some little leaf shapes. These are very simple. They're just little dabs, almost little dots. And you're going to imagine a little stem down the center with little tiny oval leaves on each side of it. You can place these wherever you want coming out of your little flower wreath. I find it easiest to draw out the little stem, make it a little curved so it's more graceful. And then you're going to just push down the very tip of that round brush to make that little oval shape. These are so delicate that you could trace them, but it's kind of hard to cover up all your pencil lines or graphite lines if you were tracing it down. Being able to freehand just something simple like this will make your painting a lot more delicate. So I'm just kind of looking at it and trying to decide where to place these little things to have some balance to the design. I think we need one probably over on the left. You can see I'm kind of indecisive on exactly where I think it needs to go. And if you want to darken your green a little bit, make it a little more muted, you can add the next primary color to that secondary color and it'll tone it down. So now we're getting more of an olivey green color instead of that bright limey green. And you can go back and just touch over some of your leaves here and there just to give them a little variation in color, a little darker color. And again, we're doing this just to add a little more interest so things aren't so even. Another way you could do this little wreath is to vary your flower colors. If you wanted to do some yellow daisies and some blue daisies and some of the pink daisies, it would be an interesting thing too. Or you could do all white daisies or you could do all yellow daisies. There's a lot of variations you could do on this little design. Once you have all your flowers painted and the way you like them, we're going to dry this. I want to make sure everything is dry because we'll be doing our pen and ink next. And you do not want to try to do pen and ink over wet paint. So be sure everything is settled and where you like it and all the layers are dry. And then we're going to take a ultra fine Sharpie pen and we're going to do the little detail outlining. I started in the centers and I'm just doing a little squiggly line around them, repeat it a couple times, and then start doing loose petals. I'm not trying to outline each of these petals exactly. Some of them I'm going 2 petals on top of one. I'm doing some petals in between the petals. This is very loose and sketchy. So, if you have a shaky hand, this is great. So this is why you want your paint to be really dry, because if your paint was wet when you tried to do these outlines, the paint would pick up into your felt tip on the pen and clog it up and it would just ruin your pen. So again, just squiggly lines around the center 2 or 3 times just to darken it, and then start doing loopy, sketchy petal shapes. Just going all around your flower petals on and off the edges. Some extend beyond where you painted your flower petals. Some are shorter. But all this sketchy pen work will just add a lot of interest and movement to these little flowers. On the leaves, I'm just doing one or two lines up following the shape of the stem, and then just little loopy outlines around the little individual leaves. So little fine line work is a little bit hard to see on the camera, but I hope you can get the idea of what I'm doing. Here's a close-up so you can see the inking in more detail. This is one I took after it was finished that I had already added the little saying and the be mine and the bee in the center. We're going to just do this all around the little wreath. So I am going to, again, fast forward the video so you can watch me doing it, but you won't have to sit here through 10 minutes or so of just watching me ink. So now we've finished up the inking on the last flower. I decided to add a little bit of highlight to the flower petals, so I'm mixing a light warm pink by using white plus a little bit of the strawberry color and a little bit of yellow. So this is going to be kind of a peachy color. You can just play with the mix a little bit to get something that you like. And then I'm just going to dab it here and there on some of the outer flower petals. This is just sort of a tint. Not quite, I guess, not quite as much of a highlight as just a little accent tint to put some of that warm peachy color into some of the flower petals. So just add a little bit here and there. I'm not putting it on every flower petal, just a few here and there. So I'm just scattering this little peachy accent kind of evenly around. If you want to step back just a little bit and view your painting from just from a little distance, sometimes it'll pop out to you where maybe you need out, something else to balance it out. So I think that looks pretty good now. So now I want to add a little bit more brightness to the the little leaves. My mouth isn't working. The leaves. So I'm just going to dab a little bit of this just plain yellow here and there on some of the little leaflets just to add a little highlight. Again, this is kind of like the flower petals. We're just doing it here and there. We're not doing it on every little leaf petal. Just hitting 2, maybe 3 on each of the little stems. I'm noticing my camera is going in and out of focus a little bit here. I used my iPhone to film this video, and I need to, I guess, look at the settings to see if there's some way I can force it to stay focused once it's set. If you want to do the bee mine and the bumblebee on your design, just transfer the pattern with your graphite, ink the letters and the bumblebee with your Sharpie pen, and paint the stripes on the bumblebee with some yellow with a little orange shading, and dot the eye with a dot of white. Here's our finished design with everything added, and the fun part is pulling the tape off. You want to pull the tape at like a 45-degree angle, and if for some reason it feels like it's pulling your paper, you can use your hairdryer to warm it up and it should peel off more easily. I've not had any trouble with this blue tape on the multimedia paper, but you may have to experiment if you're using something different. But you can see these nice clean borders just really make something special of the design. There's been paintings I've done that after I finished them, I really liked them so much that I wanted them on like a cradled canvas panel. So I cut the design out to fit the cradled canvas and decoupaged it to the surface using like a matte medium. Or you could just mat it and frame it. I had so much fun painting this design, so I hope you did too. Let me know what you think and share your design on my Facebook page. I'd love to hear from you.